I'm Denise Moorhead, and I'm a staff member at Schools for Children. We started different choices, the career fair, the college and career fair for students with learning disabilities and mental health conditions. So we are the organization, Schools for Children is the organization behind it. And we started different choices so that we know that when the supports that high school students have can seem to kind of drop off the edge of the earth. But it's our job and our partners' jobs to make sure you know that that's not the case, and that you're certainly going to have all of the supports that you had, but we want to make sure that you can get as many and know where to find them, that you've got resources, information, tips, advice on getting those kinds of supports that you need to really be successful and to enter that next phase of life in a successful way. So again, I'm your host. This session is college essay writing with the wow factor. And Symphony Hargrave is going to be your technical support person. Again, Lisa Graf is the senior college coach. She's got a passion for storytelling. And I will tell you a little bit more about her before she starts, but let me just give you a couple of housekeeping items first. They're also, Symphony's putting them in the chat. So if you have any questions for the panel, put them in the chat. Actually, Symphony, I realize that this tells people to put it in the Q&A, but you want to put stuff in the chat. If you want to ask any questions of the presenter and you want to be anonymous about it, please feel like you can send the messages to Symphony or me directly by using the chat, and just, you can click it and put a single name next to it. And if you have any technical problems, we also need you to put them in the chat, and you can send them also to support at differentchoices.org. So let me tell you a little bit about Lisa before she starts. She's really looking forward to an interactive session with you. As I said to you before, she's a senior college coach with Chandler Admissions Advisors. She has a background in marketing and advertising, which really helped her hone not only her writing, her editing, and her communication skills, but her passion for storytelling. Really what her goal is today and always is to create human connections and for you to be able to share your unique experiences through your essays, through your college applications. So I want to just open the floor to Lisa, and she will start her presentation and facilitation.
Thank you so much, Denise, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you, Symphony, for providing all the tech support. And thank you, Schools for Children, for hosting this wonderful event today. And to the audience, thank you for carving out time on a beautiful Saturday to join us. I have kind of an agenda in mind. I'd like to go over some strategies and essay writing tips with you today. And I do want to make sure I leave lots of time at the end of the presentation workshop for your questions. So please get your questions ready as we go through the slides, and go ahead and tee those up and put them into the chat. I appreciate it. Okay, so first of all, as far as the college essay, for you, you're the aspiring college student. This oftentimes is kind of the intimidating part of the process. Most students by this point, if they're thinking about colleges, they know pretty much what they need to be doing. But what they don't know is where are they going to start when it comes to their essay writing. So by the time you're thinking about this, your grades are recorded. You pretty much have a good idea of what your story is. You have your extracurriculars all set, but what you might be really worried about is, like, how do you make this impression to college admissions and tell them something personal about yourself? This is your unique opportunity and your chance to leave this impression. You're more than grades, you're more than your activities. You're human, and this opportunity is going to help tip the scales in your favor by delivering something that's very authentic and personal to your story. Go ahead. So as far as the college essay, this is an opportunity for you to focus on your strengths, focus on your goals and focus on your background. So, you know, today, one of the big things is how do I approach writing about either a learning difference or how do I describe like a mental health challenge? So these are really important questions. So this could be your story. And I think some questions you need to think about as you're brainstorming these ideas before you make this final decision. Is this something you want admissions to remember about you? Is this something that helps define you? What else drives you? What motivates you? And these are things that's really important. These are valid questions, and it really depends on you. I think it depends how you address your unique learning challenges, or maybe perhaps if you struggled with things, of course, with COVID, I think we all struggled, you know, describing that and kind of how you came out from the other side. Go ahead on to the next slide. Maybe you decide that this is key for your story. So you'll want to write on the main Common App your 650 personal statement, kind of talking about this. You can either put it in this area of the Common App, or you could also utilize the additional information section on the Common App, which is, it is something that I feel like most students don't really capitalize on that. But if you want admissions to really know about that, this is a great extra space for you to write about it. One of the things that you can also describe, because one of the personal essay prompts on the Common Application talks about, the prompt reads exactly, please provide an answer below if you wish to provide details of a circumstance that's not reflected in your application. So again, your personal statement could be something that's more intimate, and then the sharing of your challenge could be used in additional information. You know, at the end of the day, it's a personal choice whether or not to go into and describe that, if this is, you know, a part of you. I will say that I think the college admissions over the years have definitely gotten to the point where they're really looking for a very inclusive and diverse student applicant pool. And really, when it comes to, you know, thinking about students that would fill a class, they really are looking for students from all backgrounds. So I think more than ever today, I would say even more so than, you know, working with students back 6-7 years ago, they're more, you know, there's more encouragement and to talk about these things because it is authentic to your story. So go ahead. Actually, I think I skipped ahead a couple slides, so I'm moving really fast, Symphony. So a couple key things to think about is if your learning difference hasn't had a negative effect, that's kind of, you know, impacted your grades and such, then it would be a good strategy to put that in additional information. If you think that it's something that you would put into the additional information, again, that leaves room for you to discuss something really unique to you, a passion, your love for something like a favorite game, your passion for a particular subject matter, a deep knowledge, a deep interest that you've cultivated since you were a child. All of these things probably provide more meaning to you, and it's probably easier for you to write about than sometimes describing a learning difference. So what if you really want to write your personal statement about the learning difference? Go ahead into the next slide. If you do want to write about the learning difference or mental health challenge, I think that one of the prompts that you can use, which is prompt number 2, and this is exactly how it reads: the lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount a time where you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did this affect you, and what did you learn from this experience? And this really talks about an opportunity for you to kind of talk about your resilience and how you've overcome any kind of challenge. So that's something to think about. All right, the next slide, please. Okay, if you decide to write about this as a part of your story, we want to make sure we keep it in a positive light and share a story of your success. There's no doubt that you faced challenges and you had struggles, in certain classes with certain tasks relating to your education. So we don't want it to come off as you complaining and that you're a victim, but what you want it to be indicative of the fact that you can be absolutely successful as you are today to mitigate these challenges. And you're ready for this next chapter. You're ready for college. So we want to be positive and focus on your successes. Next slide, please. A few questions to think about as you're describing this. Describe how you made lemonade out of lemons. And you've probably heard this old adage, but this idea of, if you're presented with this challenge and this is what you have, like, what did you do to just make the best out of the situation? How did you learn and accomplish the goals in order to mitigate these things? How has the challenge affected the way you understand the world? And at the end, you come out on the other side and you're probably more confident, more skilled, and, learning something really important about yourself too. That's a huge takeaway. You get to take that with you to college and for the rest of your life. So whenever you're writing about your learning difference, whether it's dyslexia, ADD, we definitely recommend that you get someone, a trusted friend, your advisor, counselor, could be a family member, someone who knows you, that can read your draft and give you some feedback. Because at the end of the day, if we describe this story and how this has impacted you, we want to make sure this is very authentic and capturing who you really are. So these are just tips to think about as you're approaching your essay topics. Next slide, please. Okay, so one way to do this, as far as describing kind of the positives of a learning difference, is to think about how this addresses how your brain works in a unique way. Perhaps you could discuss how, with this learning difference, it taught you that you needed to focus, or you learned these strategies to think creatively and think outside of the box. These are all really, really great examples of things that translate to skills that are very applicable to college and beyond. Should you discuss about, overcoming your challenges? Admissions officers that we've talked to said it impresses them because they like to hear about the strategies that you figured out that work and can make a very strong impression. Again, they look for these kinds of key learnings, and they look at how you've been shaped by your experiences, and they like to see that you figured this out and you're ready for college. And I think also, if you're applying to some of the programs that are specialized and tailored to students that have learning challenges, these programs, the sharing of your learning difference is definitely welcomed and very, very safe. So, it just depends on the colleges that you're applying to, but certainly some of these programs that have these specialized programs within the school themselves, they actually welcome a specific essay which talks about that and how you've used these, the skills that you've gained, how that's going to translate to college. So you will have opportunities to write about that specifically in those applications. Okay, next slide. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this personal essay. The personal essay, this is a piece of writing that really is going to describe this important lesson that you've gathered in your experience. So the essay can describe maybe a specific event in your life. It could be done very formally. It could be done in a creative way. But usually they have kind of a conversational tone to them to kind of keep the flow. And keeping it conversational and keeping it personal, the idea is to connect with the reader, since it is a personal statement. We like to see ideas that can be inspiring and uplifting. And a lot of times these are successful strategies when it comes to ideas. Personal essays can cover a whole bunch of different topics. It could be about the first time you failed an exam as you entered high school. It could be about a passion that you've discovered. It could be about a story of being bullied, or perhaps it's a survival story. Or maybe it's a story about a teacher that changed the way you think, changed the way you feel about something, or inspired you to go deeper into a subject, through their wonderful teaching style. So it can be a whole bunch of different things. There's no uniform, like what is accepted as a personal essay. The idea is that it should be a moment in your life that sparked some kind of growth and changed you in some way. So this can be culminated in this personal statement. Next slide, please. So, oh, actually, one slide after that, I just went over that. Thank you. Okay. So colleges, you've probably read over the past couple of years, they've received a record number of applications. So admissions offices are reading a lot of wonderful essays. So what I want to do here now is to give you very specific tips, go over some ideas on how to approach your essay writing to really give it that wow factor so it stands out. So a couple of key things when it comes to drafting your essay. We suggest that you start drafting this well before the application is due. And that's because, it's the mindset of, instead of rushing, but having more clarity of thought and having time to kind of go back and think about it and reflect and rewrite and redraft, sometimes you get the best product when you've had time to really think about it. A lot of times you might start with one topic and you start writing, but you know what happens? You might come up with a really clever idea, which is a completely tangential point that came off of an idea, but that ends up being something that you discovered that you could really write something about. So I feel like that, give yourself enough time. Don't rush the process. And that way you're giving yourself the best chance to approach your idea. And definitely don't try to do and like sit down and try to bang out this essay because the application is due at midnight. I just know, and you probably know, it's not going to be your best effort. So you owe it to yourself to carve out the time, and you've come this far. So think about that and just, write and, take some time and go back to it the next day. And that's why start early. That way you'll have some good amount of time to go back to it. I think the key thing too is to be really unique and be yourself. I often get essays and then I often get students that ask me, well, what do they want to hear? What does admissions want to see? And I'll tell you that admissions wants authentic you. Every person has their own unique skills, talents. They have their own strengths and weaknesses. And, as humans, we're all imperfect. So they know that they are asking for something very personal, and they're wanting to learn more about you, something that's not necessarily represented in just your transcript, guidance counselor report, and teacher recs. So really, I'd stress that try to show some personality and show them that you love learning and you love writing. So I think that is a great approach when approaching your essays. Also, another key thing, it never fails, but every now and then I get some students that share essays, and sometimes their beautiful writing doesn't quite answer the prompt. So definitely take time to really read the prompt thoroughly. There's a reason the college has prepared a thoughtful prompt, and they're looking for thoughtful answers. So don't rush it. Definitely take your time to formulate your answers. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so when it comes to writing your essay, we know this, we've learned this in our English classes. Good essay should have an introduction, then a body, and then a conclusion. So the introduction, the first sentence should say something that's going to try to grab, these are some tips, grab the reader's attention. So I think providing the personal statement, you're going to prove your personal statement through the body of the essay. But I think sometimes coming up with a fun way to engage the reader right off the bat, something unexpected, nothing like a cliche, just like a famous quote, but maybe something more like a unique connection, something that's happened. Sometimes I've seen students bring you into kind of the middle of the story, if you will, to kind of bring a little bit of to grab the reader's attention and go from there. The body really is going to be your opportunity to be the meat of the story, and this is going to come up with your evidence, which is going to support what you want to say as far as your thesis. Where for you as a writer, this is where you're going to share how these personal experiences shaped your point of view. And what did you learn from all of this? Admissions wants to hear this. But of course, like it's about describing it in a way and really kind of being self-aware about what your takeaway is over your college experience and sharing a particular story. As far as the conclusion, I think the key point is you kind of want to restate or revisit your thesis. What's your point? What piece, what truth do you want admissions to be left with? This is kind of like your parting thought. You want to kind of sum up your argument, you want to sum up your thoughts, and this is what they're going to take away from your essay. So, okay, next slide, please. All right, so as far as some just tips when you get, start writing, here's a couple of really helpful ways to approach it. First of all, definitely see if you can create a type of outline. We think that this is a very helpful tool. So you can just lay out some of the main points that you want to think about, and you can think about tone of the message that you want to share with admissions. I think also the outline kind of helps you figure out maybe a specific moment that you want to capture that is actually something that you want to write about. So whatever your topic is, I'm sure there might have been some type of an emotional impact, and it may have taught you a lesson in some way. So these are things that you want to kind of capture while you're writing in your outline. As far as the intro, we talked a little bit about the hook, or stating a thesis, or sharing something that can even provide an emotional connection to the reader. I think it really helps set up the audience to understand a little bit about what you're going to speak about, and gives them something to look forward to as well. As far as filling the body paragraphs, this is pretty straightforward as far as take the reader through your experience. Support it, show and not tell. Support it with specific stories, specific anecdotes that describe what it is that you're trying to convey. The body is going to be typically anywhere from 3 to 5 paragraphs, depending on how the structure of your essay goes. Again, there's no formal structure other than the fact that we want an intro, a main body, and a conclusion. But I think the key thing is to be really, really specific. Specific about a significant moment, more than just stating generalities, because details make it real. Details show and share so much more about you than writing in generalities. Okay, finally, we talked about the importance of a conclusion. Summarizing something about this experience and what it's taught you is really important, whether it was a difficult or unsettling revelation, but ending it on some kind of positive note, a hopeful note. This can leave the admissions reader with a lot to think about, and it could provide a more uplifting and aspirational feeling after reading your statement. And the last thing, to make sure you proof your work, share your essay with your guidance counselor or your English teachers or your parents, or an adult that's in your life that knows you well, but always get someone to help you look over stuff. Sometimes outsider looking in and reading things for the first time or hearing it for the first time can help you with your editing as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so I wanted to give you an example of a hypothetical This was actually something that I found on MIT's admissions website, but I thought this was a really, really good example. So you could see kind of a strategy for introductory paragraphs. So in this case, here's like one way to describe this introductory paragraph or this program in library science. Okay. I'm honored to apply for the Master of Library Science program at the University of O because as long as I can remember, I've had a love affair with books. Since I was 11, I've known I've always wanted to be a librarian. Very nicely written and straightforward, right? It tells the admissions exactly what program the student was interested in and describes, you know, their passion a little bit. But here's the second example of this type of intro, but done in a little bit of a different way. When I was 11, my great aunt Gretchen passed away and left me something that changed my life, a library of about 5,000 books. Some of my best days were spent arranging and reading her books. Since then, I've wanted to be a librarian. So here we have a really interesting example of they're about the same length. The description, the applicant clearly wants to be a librarian since she was a young girl. That was established. However, the first one is so generic, right? It's just kind of straightforward, want to apply because as long as I've known, I've always been interested in books. But the second one, we bring in some very specific evidence and context, right? We talk about how there was a great aunt who changed her life by gifting her all these books. And then she got involved reading and arranging and everything. So it just adds all this detail and it just brings the reader into the story. And it really shows that this was a real person describing a real experience. And that's exactly why they say it's things like that that are the best examples to use in your essays. This was a college tip provided by Chris Peterson, who's assistant director at MIT. It was on his blog. So I thought that was a great example of something that you can do too when thinking about ways to describe the experience. Get really specific. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so overall, here are the big tips as far as approaching the process. Make it completely personal. By picking something that you're writing about that's personal, no one else can write this essay but you. So that's where the brainstorm is going to come in. So take your time and try to come up with those things that are very much a personal story to you and your experience. Using the opening paragraph that's funny or thoughtful, because again, we talked a little bit about the hook. You want that reader to be engaged and be willing to read more right off the bat. So the next piece, capturing a story to show what you've learned. We talked a little bit about like how do you want to approach whether it's a learning challenge or a mental health struggle. Something that illustrates what you've gone through and how you came out on the other side is really important. This is a key one for me too. Staying on your particular subject. I see this all the time where students come in and they want to rehash their list of amazing awards and accomplishments all through a resume. Or I'm sorry, all through their essay. And it comes off reading like a resume. We definitely don't want to do that because at this point, admissions has already reviewed your application and they're really looking to find something about you, what's under the hood. So I think that this is where getting personal, getting a little bit more intimate about the topic is the way to go versus just going over about all these accomplishments because they've already got that. You're more than grades, you're more than your board scores and your extracurriculars. So take the time to really write about that. Okay, as far as thinking about subject matters, I like this idea of coming up with something that's a little bit of a risk, being bold, and having something that's what I call sticky. So it is something that's personal to you. So think about like what defines you? What are some of your favorite passions? What are some things that's so uniquely you? And sometimes when you come up with these kinds of ideas, the essay becomes almost mnemonic because it becomes very different. They'll read a lot of essays that sound kind of similar, but then for you to come up with something that's uniquely you, but it's also catchy, that helps them to remember what a terrific personal statement this is. I think another key thing is using language that you normally use. I think it should sound conversational, and you don't necessarily have to impress the admissions offices by whipping out the thesaurus and coming up with all kinds of big words because you think that you need to sound a certain way. I think the key thing is being authentic to your voice and capturing your passion, and they'll get that. And the last piece, proof your writing. Send it to your English teachers, share it with guidance, share it with your parents, get feedback. They're going to offer all kinds of great tips and share their thoughts on how to make it just that much better. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and here's a couple other essay writing tips. I think just as a general rule, just to keep in mind, don't rehash your resume. And you know what, here's the piece about not talking about a particular topic. What I mean by topic here is the personal essay. This is not a book essay or a DBQ on a particular, particular piece of writing. This is a personal statement. So again, I feel like explore specific moments in your life and talk about that can help you reveal your character. Don't start off the essay by announcing that this is my essay, which is going to talk about my commitment to philanthropy or my commitment to community service. You don't need to start the essay by getting attention in that way. Instead, jump right into your story, jump into some kind of dialogue, get creative, and open it that way. I think sometimes I see essays which end with this kind of a wrap up of what they think the essay should say, which is this important lesson. I think the idea is you don't have to tell them that this was the important lesson, but you can just share how you've grown through the experience. They're more interested in you and your perspective, and just as far as a conclusion. As far as don't pontificate. You don't have to tell them that this is the way that they should be thinking, but I think it's the big idea of using the essay to be expressive of a platform for yourself, but you don't have to tell them what they should be thinking. As far as retreating into your thoughts, I thought this was a really interesting one. As far as there's a lot of students that write about all these great thoughts that they have, which is a wonderful thing. At the same time, I think admissions, they really want to hear, what did you do about these thoughts? So it's not about having this grand idea, but it's more about if you had something and you were passionate, what did you do? What was that next step? How did you explore it? How did you dive into it? What did you do about it? If you saw some kind of injustice, what did you do to mitigate that? So I think that's the idea of really showing and not telling. As far as the TMI, I think we get this piece. You definitely want to be careful with what you share with admissions. I've seen it all. I've had students that wanted to share very specific pieces, but we've got to use some kind of a filter here. I think you need to be, not that it's completely off limits by any means, but if you're going to talk about certain things, use discretion. Think about maybe what your grandparents would think. I think sometimes we want to kind of err on the side of being a little bit more drawing people into the experience, but not necessarily giving them a little bit too much that they get turned off, right? You don't want to shock them and scare them from finishing the essay too. Finally, here's another important piece. This can happen if you have a great essay. When you end up showing it to 10 different people, you will absolutely get 10 different opinions. And I think there is something to be said for having kind of a trusted core group, whether it's, a trusted teacher, your advisor, parents, a few people to look at it, great, but you don't want to bring in the whole class, right? It's just because you'll just get so much feedback that what happens is everyone has a personal take on what they like about the story, and they have a different way of, how they think it should be described. And guess what? once you take a lot of ideas and suggestions, suddenly you end up losing your voice. That's the one thing you cannot do in this process. It has to be authentic to your voice. So it's a key piece for me. Definitely make sure you stay authentic to your voice. And then finally, the over editing. Believe it or not, I've seen this. I've seen the students get kind of to the same point, so many people involved that you almost over edit in the same thing. It ends up not sounding like the student anymore. And I think that's where it's, we just got to use really good judgment on when you feel like take great feedback and comments from people. They want to help you succeed. At the same time, make sure it sounds like you, and don't let it sound like a generic everybody else, type of essay. Okay, next slide. Okay, as far as other tips, one thing I wanted to share is if you're starting to write and you're not really sure what to write, here's a couple of ideas to kind of free write and get you thinking. I think one important question I like to ask my students when they're approaching the essay is think about one thing that no one really knows about, that's not reflected in your essay, but you wish people knew about you. And if you could figure out a few things, like jot them down, because these can be great starts of essay ideas for you. You could also talk about what your aspirations are or what your dream is. And those can be also great ideas to kind of launch you on some essay ideas. Maybe talk about what you enjoyed most about your high school experience. And guess what? Another important topic is, what do you think was the biggest challenge that you faced in high school? What would you not want to relive? Sometimes these very personal stories where, you open up about your feelings and you open up about the response and what you went through. What's really interesting about that, by opening up, is that you end up really connecting with the reader. And that's a great thing, because we've all been there. We've all been faced with challenges, and we've all faced the ups and downs of education and high school life. And these are great moments to write about because we share them. They were awkward, but they were, they were teaching moments. They might have been embarrassing or uncomfortable, but weirdly, like they were opportunities to show tremendous growth. So these kinds of ideas are great because they share that you're very self-aware, and this is how you came out from the other side, and this is what you've learned, and this is why you are so prepared for the next chapter in your life. So and I would say, as far as another way to kind of approach ideas that are uniquely you, describe yourself, use a few adjectives, like 3-4 adjectives. How would you describe yourself? Or maybe even think about how your best friend or parents, how would they describe you? These can be great starter ideas for writing your essays as well. I like to definitely encourage my students to write, but then be able to kind of put the pen down and go back to it the next day, because I think that you just can't always get it all done in one setting. So I like to encourage that kind of time to reflect and think about it. Maybe have a journal or have your paper started, and throughout the day, maybe go back to it and jot down some more ideas. You'd be really surprised when you go back to it the next day, reread your thoughts, and see what came out of you capturing some of these ideas that you worked on throughout the day. If you do this for a few days, you will definitely have some ideas that you can read out loud, and perhaps even share some of these ideas with your trusted advisor, your English teacher, your guidance counselor. They're advocating for you. They'd love to help you, and they can be a trusted resource to bounce these ideas back to. Okay, next slide. Okay, I wanted to open this up to questions, and if you have some specific things, please share.
I have a question. This is Denise,
Oh, yes.
actually. Excuse me. First off, I do want to say to people, please make sure you put your questions, please put your questions in the chat. We would love to get your questions. I know that Lisa is really, especially if you've got something that's very specific to, a challenge you're having right now in getting your essay written. She'd like to hear what you're doing now, what's happening, at this moment. Certainly, this is the time of year when folks are like pulling together applications. So this is your opportunity to get some fabulous advice. But my question to you is, you talked about being able to talk about some personal things. Is there a time when it gets, you spoke about this a little bit, but maybe you could go a little more in depth into when is it too personal, or when is it that you're putting it a certain way that, you can put it one way and it's like you say, it's very positive, but it's still personal. There's another way you can do it that it's like the Oprah Winfrey show versus, one of those other shows where she's oftentimes kept it kind of at a certain level. How can you get yourself kind of in trouble by telling information that nobody really needs to know?
Right. So that's an excellent question. And I'll tell you, this is hard because, it's got to be authentic to yourself for sure. I like for the students to be as honest as they can be. However, here's a perfect example. Working with students, they might have shared something, they went through something in their lives that they turned to drug use. That's going to be, we don't really want to go into depth about the drug use, right? But I think the idea is, the student definitely hit a low and definitely was reaching for something, right? And in this case, like this particular student obviously found their way out, got help, and learned so much from it. So again, if it's something like that, like I think the idea is, how did that student pivot in direction? And how did the student come out on the other side? Because what a tremendous story that was. But I think it's not about how low that student went, but it's more about how that student bravely pivoted, sought help, got it, and moved on, right? And is ready and is positive and everything. So I feel like this is where go to your advisor, go to your, share with your parents. Sometimes I have students, they're not comfortable sharing certain things with their parents, which I get. And in that case, I say, definitely go to your advisor, because these are very personal stories, and I don't, everyone's got kind of a different comfort level as far as what they want to share on a personal level. But I think the key is, don't sugarcoat anything. Don't be afraid to not dig a little bit deeper. Life is messy. We're imperfect. And you know what? You students out there have amazing stories. Each and every one of you has a story to share. But I just feel like, don't necessarily want them focusing on just something and use it as an excuse to paint you in some way. Make sure you show the pivot and how strong and resilient and everything that came about and the life lessons that you've learned. I think that's kind of like my approach that I would recommend. But thank you. That was a great question. What I could do if there, great. There's a question.
How do you help a student who is really stuck and can't come up with a topic to write about at all?
Well, I think some of the strategies that I was just talking about, they're great ideas. So for this particular student, I asked them, what is one thing that no one knows about you, that's not reflected in your school life, that you think you would want to share? And I'll tell you, every student's got strengths. Maybe this particular student, maybe you're the mediator. Maybe you're that student that can break up any fight, get people to the table. Maybe you're that great listener. You're an empath. Maybe everyone comes to you because they know you're just like that person that you offer a non-judgmental, safe zone for them to dump their problems and just share. I just feel like there's so much to you. Every student is unique, and you just have to find something that is definitely a part of you, that like what your strengths are. Like, how do you describe yourself? And how does your bestie describe you? I think those are definitely different ways. And if not, guess what? I'd be happy to meet with you. I'd be happy to bounce ideas with you. And my contact information is on the last slide. So reach out. I'd love to take a look at what you've drafted and give you some thoughts on ways to discuss things that are uniquely you and make sure we capture your unique story. But thank you. That was a great question. Are there
We don't have a huge amount of time left, but we'd love to get some more. Anybody have any questions before we go? Anything else before we go? I know you've hung in there. You've been here the whole time and obviously really enjoyed what you had to hear. So this is your chance to talk to somebody who's a professional writer, you know, and coach. So that combination is a pretty sweet one when you're trying to write a college essay. So, you know, and the thing is, if you're feeling embarrassed about doing that, you could just drop something in the chat to me or to Symphony, and we'd be glad to ask the question for you. So,
absolutely.
Sorry. Oh, I thought I heard somebody saying. Heard something, but okay.
Well, you know what? If there are no more questions, one of the things I could do, I've got a sample essay that I could share.
Oh, that's fabulous. That would be great.
Okay.
Could we see that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason why I wanted to share this was written by a student that I worked with a couple years ago who had several learning differences, and I wanted to share an example of how you can capture your learning difference and spin it in a positive way. So I figured if people, because I know you could always email Denise and the team with follow-up questions, but I'd be happy to share this with you. I'll read this. It'll only take a minute.
That would be great. We'd love to hear it.
Yeah, this is
spark some thinking too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Here we go. My passion for fishing started at age 3 when my dad took me to a local pond to introduce the sport. The exhilaration I felt from catching my first fish remains one of my most vivid childhood memories and marked the start of an incredible personal journey. For me, fishing is more than a sport. It's a source of clarity, balance, and inspiration. As a child, I was diagnosed with dyslexia and other learning differences. The challenges of learning in a traditional classroom left me feeling frustrated and lost. Fishing became an escape that allowed me to decompress and be in the moment. In high school, I began working with a learning specialist, Ms. Smith, who took an interest in helping me close the gap between my potential and my performance. After months of slow progress, she asked me one day to advise her on how to become an adept fisherman. It was the first time anyone ever asked me to share my knowledge. I immediately embraced my role as teacher. I explained to Ms. Smith that truly skilled fishing requires attention to detail. When I approach a body of water, the first thing I do is observe. I survey for spots where fish will congregate, the shade of an overhanging tree, an inlet from a tributary, a plunging rocky shore. I take my hand and I get a feel for the temperature of the water because fish will swim the shallows or depths based on temperature. The clarity of the water, the wind conditions, changes of the current all play a part for creating a complex problem set that requires constant reassessment throughout the day. Next, I advise that while there's no substitute for personal experience, research from other sources is essential to expanding your knowledge. Reading fishing periodicals, studying various ecosystems, watching hundreds of videos, I've acquired in-depth knowledge on over 880 species of fish. When traveling to a new location, I frequent the fishing shops and I talk with locals to draw on their wisdom. While they're often reluctant to share the hot fishing spots, fishermen find it difficult to stop from boasting about their recent catches. I can usually get a sense of what lures are working the best. Finally, I caution that despite all this preparation, fishing still requires on-site adaptation. I highlighted a recent trip. It was one of my favorite spots, and I brought along gear particularly suited for this site. However, when I arrived, I found that it was inaccessible. I had to move to another area of the lake and rely on my skills to adjust to the unforeseen circumstances. I targeted an inviting laydown, which is a term for falling trees in the water. My challenge was that I only packed floating baits for the rocky areas, and now I needed baits that would operate below the water surface. So I reconfigured the equipment to sink without making the action of the lure seem unnatural. It was a solution, but I was really strong in my desire to express to my teacher that fishing is not about style, it's about results. So as I finished explaining, I looked at Miss Smith and I immediately knew what had just happened. In that moment, I saw what had eluded me all these years. Understanding how I process and absorb knowledge. From that day, everything about my academics changed, except my close relationship with the teacher that took an interest in me. As I've grown, I've looked to the lessons that fishing has taught me for guidance. It helped me learn how to clarify my mind and focus myself. It taught me essential skills I need to succeed and allowed me to balance my strengths and my weaknesses. The pure focus on this activity and the knowledge it takes to perfect this skill is exactly how I will approach my future studies in college. So here is a great example. This particular student not only wrote very specifically about his learning challenges, but also shared about how he learned exactly how his brain works, his unique way. And I'm happy to say that I have continued to keep in touch with this particular student. And this student is crushing it in college. You know, really found his momentum, is in honors on the dean's list. He just really found his groove. And I think it had everything to do with being in that supportive environment where he could really thrive. And sharing your unique story and passions, like this particular student, this is how you're going to get colleges to want you for their freshman class. So thank you for listening. I hope that this was helpful to give you some ideas on how to approach essay writing. And feel free, if you have questions, email or reach out. We'd love to follow up with you and help out with whatever you need.
Thank you. Thank you so very, very, very much. This was remarkable. I learned a lot. Obviously, I'm not going to be writing a college essay anytime soon, but I have a nephew who I can definitely, I'm going to share this video with him for sure. So excellent presentation. We've got in the chat, there wasn't a question, but it was a note saying, this was an excellent presentation. Thank you. And it was indeed. So, well, and I could say thank you from Schools for Children and Different Choices. This is a wonderful opportunity to hear from somebody, as I say, who's not only a good writer, but a great writer, but a great coach as well, and helps other people figure this out. So I want to thank the folks who were here today for the presentation. Thank you for joining us. The exhibitor showcase is just about wrapping up, so I can't really invite you to come, but I can certainly hope that you'll stay in touch with us at Different Choices. We've got lots of social media channels, and you can subscribe to a newsletter that we have that only comes out like a couple times a year, but it's really informative. You definitely want to go to our website, differentchoices.org. You also may want to learn a lot about Schools for Children and what we're about. But in terms of getting excellent transition information, materials, resources, there's a resource directory, resource page on our website. And we're putting all kinds of new information this year from, we have lots of information from the 2021 Different Choices Fair, and a lot that was that we've accumulated over the past year. People now send us information that they know is relevant to, to young people who have learning disabilities and mental health conditions, and how they can sort of navigate where they're going next in life. So thank you all. Thank you, Lisa, and thank you all for coming. And you take care and definitely continue to stay in touch with different choices. All right. Bye-bye now.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.